All right, we're back again. It's Q1, week 6, still day 1. This is video number 24. Today we're going to actually build a crate. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on actually laying out how this will look. Okay, so what we need to do is understand the basics of the UV modifier. So yesterday, or actually earlier today, theoretically, when you watched the last video, we took this cube and we threw a material on it, and it kind of worked out. But a lot of times just slapping a material onto an object won't actually solve what we want to happen. Okay, for instance, if I take a material, all right, let's go ahead and hit M for material, and then I'll bring that folder back up, and I put a material here, and I put a material here, and a material here, because I want this crate to have 3 different sides. Okay, if I want that sort of situation, it can be difficult to make sure that it all lays out appropriately. If I just take a material scanline standard and I attach this to the diffuse, and then I make sure I have the object selected, show in viewport, select, boom. If I have that, like, it sets the same material on every single object, and that's not okay. And if I add another material to it, well, that just overwrites it. Okay, there are ways to get around this, but mostly they involve selecting individual faces. I'm going to convert this to editable poly, and I'm going to select a face like this, and then I can try and create a new material, standard, and let's see, I'll do this to there, and then I can add this to selection. And that kind of works, but then you're actually dealing with each individual face, and that's just not very practical, because oftentimes our models will have thousands, even possibly millions of faces. So selecting each individual face isn't necessarily a great way to sort of decide on how this is going to work. Now, if you recall, UV is actually called UV projection, because what happens is it's basically like you're taking a projector and you're projecting this image onto this particular face. Right? Now there's different ways to do that. For instance, we can take this UV here, this UV projection, and we can determine how those faces are laid out using the UV modifier, the UV Unwrap modifier. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Rather than doing this individual face process, which is not efficient, we're going to create and modify the UV layout. Okay, currently all of these faces are overlapping one another. So when I put one image, when I put my material on one object, or on the object, it automatically applies to the entire object. See, I just overwrote that one. Right? So here's what I want to do. I want to be able to say, all right, this face gets this image, this face gets another one, this one gets another one, while still keeping the whole concept going. So let's go ahead and start that. So I'm going to move this off to the side for a minute, and then we are going to go ahead and select our object, which is currently called started cube, but I'm going to call it crate. And then I'm going to click the modifier tab and type in UN, and that brings me to Unwrap UVW. Realistically, you can just type UN and hit enter, and it'll automatically add that modifier. Now, we've talked about this before, but see this little square right here? This square means that I am only applying this modifier to that particular square. Now, if you go back to the editable poly, click yes, it's going to say, hey, you're going back and it's going to change stuff. That's true. Now, we said earlier that we had selected things. So I was on the polygon sub-object selection. Well, if I have that selected, even if there's nothing selected, then this modifier is only affecting what is selected in the sub-modifier section. So basically, what I've done here, and I've seen multiple students come up with this problem, and it happened to me when I was first starting as well, where I thought I was covering things, I thought I did something, and nothing would work. And the reason is, I am basically telling the modifier list to only do the unwrap UVW on the editable poly that is selected, even though there are no editable polys selected. So basically I'm telling it, do this to nothing. So we got to make sure that nothing is selected here. So I'm modifying, doing the UV unwrap to every single poly. Okay. Anyway, that's a common mistake that happens all the time. Anyway, so like we said, we have the UV unwrap modifier. Now we opened it last time, and we had this box, and we sort of looked at it, and we played around with some of the different shapes, and we know that this cube, right, and I'll try and have it so you can sort of see it. We know that this cube is modified by having 6 sides, and we're starting with a cube because it's got 6 sides and it's easy. So we know that we have 6 sides. Now when I grab a side and move it, I can move them around and it moves the shape. And if I select each one, I bet I'm going to end up with 6 of these boxes. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. That makes sense because this is a 6-sided cube. Makes a lot of sense. Because of that, we know that each one of these faces corresponds to a face on the box. Think of it like a die, right? Each one of these would be this would be the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, and the 6. Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to put all of these images that I have into one image and efficiently lay them out so that they can be used. So I can create one image that has all of the faces on it, and I can color it in like a coloring book. And that's what I'm going to do. So each one of these faces in particular needs to be mapped. Now let's say that each one of these, so we know each one of these corresponds to a side, but I want them all to fit. Okay, and I don't want to distort them, because if I start distorting them like this, because I can make them all fit, but if I make them all fit like this, that's not going to look very good. I can move this wherever I want, but it gets all distorted and it looks bad. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure they stay the right size. Okay, now what happens if I distorted something and then I forgot and I saved it, and now this image is now ruined, right? I can't get it back to square, or at least I think it's square, but it's not quite perfect. You can actually always reset sizes by relaxing them. Relaxing them is a tool that we are going to use extensively. This tool up here under relax, and it says relax by polygon angles, which basically means it's going to relax this shape, this particular polygon, to where it's naturally formed. Okay, so that's great. So what we have now is we have this image properly sized as to the way it was before. Now the UV that we have in the background, this sort of checker map, is basically saying how much space is in this image. Now every single image that we will ever use is going to be square. Mostly this is because computers work best in square images, binary square images. It doesn't have any wasted memory, and there's a whole bunch of ways that they calculate numbers, makes square binary images the most efficient way to do things. So that's why this checker map is square, because every image that you should ever use is going to be square or be part of a square. And we'll get into that later. But for now, what we want to do is we want to fit all 6 of these squares into this square, and we want them all basically even. So what we can do is we can actually grab the corner of this using Control, and it will automatically resize this accordingly. All right, and what we want to do is we want to find a way to fit as many of these in here as possible. All right, so we're just going to zoom in by moving in and out with the middle mouse button, and then holding the middle mouse button to pan, and then holding Control when we resize these images. Okay, what I want to do is I want to fit at least 3 into this square, and I want them all to be roughly the same size. All right, and I want a little bit of space between them. This may seem weird, especially because currently they don't look very good. It looks weird. Currently it looks kind of bad, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them all approximately the same size and make sure that they all fit, and then we're fitting them inside the box. So I'm going to get all 3 of these, and you can marquee select all of them. I'm going to make sure that they all fit just to the edge of the box, zoom out, zoom in, and I'm going to hold Control again and then scale that down so it fits just right. Now each one of these still has a little bit of space between it and they're not overlapping. That's going to be important later. But for now, what we want to do is sort of get that set up. Now, with the rest of the space, we have to fit everything inside this box. It may seem weird, and I understand that, but it will make sense in a minute because you've got to think of this box as all the real estate you have to work with. So if you can fit everything in this box, you're going to be okay. So I'm taking the time to move this in like that and hold Control and scale it down. And we want to make sure that each one of these boxes is set up as close as we can to the others so that they're all approximately the same size. I'm going to hold Control again and scale that way, and then I'm going to scoot this one over so that there's space between it. Cool. It should be approximately the same size. And then finally, this box will go, it can go here, I suppose. If I overlap it for now, that's not a big deal because I'm going to fix it here in a second. Wow, that one was good. All right, slide that over just a little bit and make sure it's inside the box. There. So now, that's about as efficient as a image you can get for 6 sides in a square. Because theoretically 9 sides could fit, but we don't have 9. And if we make one of these bigger, like let's say this one, then actually let's just go ahead and do that. Let's make this one really big. Why? Well, you'll see. All right, so cool. So now what we've done is we've created 5 sides that are the same size and one that's really, really big. All right, they're not equally, but however, they are all square. They're all the exact same size that they started with. So this is going to be our coloring book. Okay, we talk about UV maps. Okay, so when you export a UV map, which is what we're going to do in just a second, you're exporting a coloring book for Photoshop. You're going to take that coloring book into Photoshop, like a coloring page, and you're going to color it in Photoshop, and then you're going to bring it back and see how it looks. Okay, because what we're doing is we're setting up the projection of each one of these sides. Now you'll notice one is getting a lot more space than the other. This one, you can see. Now that's weird, and usually we won't do that, but let's pretend that we are making an object where the player character is going to see this side the most, and these other sides are going to be, I don't know, not important for some reason. Think of it like you're making a character. The face needs to be highly detailed, but maybe the bottom of the shoes that are always going to be on the floor don't need to be nearly as detailed. So this side is in particular going to get a lot of detail because it's going to get a majority of this overall resolution image. So the larger the image is, the larger the polygon, the more space it takes up on the UV, the more detail you can have in it. And that's what we're going to show you next. All right, so we've laid out our UV. Now we're going to export it. Go to Tools, go down to Render UVW Template, click OK. Now, for a UVW template, the width and height are the resolution of the UVW, or the UV template. Okay, this is how detailed our coloring book is going to be. Generally, for now, as of 2017, we generally export for now at 2048. And now this is larger than any of the materials that we actually will export because we want a higher resolution UV to sort of future-proof things as computers get faster. Basically, the bigger the resolution, the more memory it will take. So for now, we're going to export this at 2048. We're going to hit Render UV Template, and it'll pop up this black window. It may pop underneath sometimes. I've noticed that. And it looks black with this green spot, or green checker. Go ahead and save the image. We're going to save it as crate. Instead of DM, I'm going to call it UV. And instead of 256, I'm going to call it 2048. All right? And format is going to be a PNG like usual. Hit save. It's going to make sure RGB 24-bit and alpha channel are selected just like it always is. Nothing changed. Click done. All right, cool. Now, next time, we are going to use this coloring book and make our crate in Photoshop. So if you're ready, go ahead and start up Photoshop, and then I'll see you in the next video. We'll start right there. All right? See you next time.